The thunderous crack of a gunshot echoed through the dusty streets of Silver Creek, Montana Territory, 1875, as Rose Vallencourt ducked behind a water trough, her heart hammering against her ribs. The once peaceful mining town had erupted into chaos the moment her father's will was read, revealing that she, not her uncle, had inherited the most productive silver mine in the territory. Now, bullets splintered the wood mere inches from her head as her own flesh and blood tried to ensure she wouldn't live to claim her birthright. "Miss Vallencourt," a deep voice called out over the gunfire. "Stay down." Through the haze of dust and gun smoke, Rose glimpsed a tall figure moving with practiced efficiency between buildings. The stranger fired 2 precise shots that sent her uncle's men scrambling for cover. With their attention diverted, he sprinted to her position, sliding into place beside her as another volley of bullets peppered the ground where he'd stood moments before. "Lucas Jameson," he introduced himself, tipping his worn Stetson with one hand while the other reloaded his Colt revolver with astonishing speed. "Seems you've made some powerful enemies, madam." Rose's emerald eyes met his steely blue gaze. "I didn't ask for any of this, Mr. Jameson. Few ever do." A bullet whizzed overhead, and he instinctively pulled her closer. "But right now, we need to get you somewhere safe." Rose nodded, clutching the deed to the Silver Baron mine in her trembling hands. Her father had built that mine from nothing, and his final wish was for her to carry on his legacy. Uncle Vernon had other plans, deadly ones. Lucas assessed their surroundings with the practiced eye of a man accustomed to danger. "When I give the signal, we're going to make for the livery. My horse is there. Ready?" Before Rose could answer, Lucas fired 3 rapid shots that created the diversion they needed. He grabbed her hand, and they ran, boots kicking up dust as they weaved between buildings. Rose's skirts tangled around her legs, but Lucas's firm grip kept her upright and moving. They reached the livery stable just as a bullet splintered the wooden frame beside Rose's head. Lucas shoved her inside, following closely and barring the door behind them. "Mount up," he ordered, indicating a magnificent Palomino stallion already saddled in the corner stall. "I can't leave town," Rose protested, even as she backed away from the door that was now being pounded upon from the outside. "Everything I have is here. Nothing you have will matter if you're dead," Lucas countered, his voice soft but firm as he swung himself into the saddle and extended his hand. "Your father's mine will still be here when we return. With proper help." The door shuddered under the impact of something heavy. Rose glanced at the deed in her hand, then at Lucas's outstretched palm. In one fluid motion, she tucked the document into her bodice and accepted his hand, allowing him to pull her up behind him. "Hold tight," he instructed as he urged the Palomino toward the rear exit of the stable. "This might get rough." Rose wrapped her arms around his waist just as Lucas kicked open the back door and spurred the horse into a gallop. Bullets zinged past them as they thundered out of town, but Lucas kept them moving in an unpredictable pattern that made them difficult targets. Only when Silver Creek had shrunk to a distant smudge on the horizon did Lucas slow their pace to spare the horse. The endless Montana landscape stretched before them, rolling plains giving way to the distant promise of mountains. "Thank you," Rose said, her voice barely audible over the rhythmic hoofbeats. "But why would you risk your life for a stranger?" Lucas was silent for a long moment. "Your father was no stranger to me. I owed him my life." Rose's grip on his waist tightened slightly. "You knew my father?" "William Vallencourt gave me a chance when no one else would," Lucas replied, his voice carrying notes of respect and sorrow. "I was passing through when I heard about his death. Came to pay my respects, arrived just in time to see your uncle's men drawing on you." The sun began its descent toward the western horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple. As darkness approached, Lucas guided his horse toward a cluster of cottonwood trees nestled beside a small creek. "We'll camp here tonight," he announced, helping Rose dismount. Her legs trembled from the unaccustomed hours of riding. "Tomorrow we'll head to Fort Benton. I know people there who can help establish your legal claim." As Lucas busied himself making camp, Rose sank onto a fallen log, reality finally catching up to her. In a single day, she had nearly been killed by her own uncle, fled the only home she'd known since arriving from Boston 3 years prior, and placed her trust in a mysterious cowboy who somehow knew her father. "How did you know my father?" she asked as Lucas returned from gathering firewood. He knelt to arrange the kindling. "I drifted into Silver Creek about 4 years back. Had a reputation that preceded me, not a good one. Your father needed guards for a silver shipment after a string of robberies. He hired me when others wouldn't." The fire caught, illuminating Lucas's features. Rose studied him openly for the first time, the strong jawline shadowed with stubble, the small scar that traced a path along his right cheekbone, the eyes that seemed to hold years beyond his apparent age of 30 or so. "You were an outlaw?" she ventured. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I was a bounty hunter. Made enemies of some powerful people when I brought in a killer whose brother was a state senator." The flames cast dancing shadows across his face. "Your father didn't care about rumors. Said he judged men by their actions, not hearsay." Rose felt a pang of grief. That sounded exactly like her father, direct, fair, uncompromising in his principles. "That still doesn't explain why you'd risk your life for me today." Lucas looked up, meeting her gaze steadily. "Because William Vallencourt's last words to me were to watch over his daughter if anything happened to him. He sensed your uncle's ambitions, even then." Rose's breath caught. "When did he tell you this?" 6 months ago. I was passing through, took a job guarding another shipment. He mentioned feeling unwell, said he'd changed his will." Lucas's expression darkened. "I should have stayed." "You couldn't have known," Rose said softly, surprised to find herself comforting this stranger. No one expected his heart to give out so suddenly. As the night deepened around them, Lucas prepared a simple meal of jerky and hardtack from his saddlebags. Rose accepted her portion gratefully, suddenly aware of her ravenous hunger. They ate in companionable silence, the crackling fire and distant sounds of nocturnal creatures the only accompaniment to their thoughts. "Get some rest," Lucas eventually said, offering her his bedroll. "I'll keep watch." Rose hesitated. "Mr. Jameson, Lucas," he corrected gently. "Lucas," she amended. "What happens after Fort Benton? Uncle Vernon won't simply give up because I've fled. That mine produces nearly $300 of silver or daily." Lucas nodded grimly. "I expect he'll send men after us, but I've dealt with worse odds." He checked his revolver before tucking it back into its holster. "One step at a time, Miss Vallencourt. First, we secure your legal standing. Then we figure out how to make it safe for you to return." "Rose," she said, mirroring his earlier correction. "If we're to be traveling companions, we might as well use our given names." A genuine smile softened his weathered features. "Very well, Rose." As she settled onto the bedroll, exhaustion quickly overtaking her, Rose found herself studying Lucas as he sat vigilant by the fire. Despite the danger surrounding them, she felt oddly safe in his presence. Her last thought before sleep claimed her was that her father had chosen her protector well. Dawn broke over the eastern horizon, painting the Montana sky in watercolor hues of pink and gold. Rose awoke to the aroma of coffee brewing over a small fire. Lucas sat nearby, whittling a piece of wood with a knife that appeared and disappeared between his nimble fingers with practiced ease. "Good morning," he greeted, noticing her stirring. "Hope you like your coffee strong." Rose sat up, brushing strands of auburn hair from her face. "After yesterday, I believe I need it strong." She accepted the tin cup he offered, savoring the bitter warmth. "How far to Fort Benton?" 2 days' ride if we push hard, Lucas replied, extinguishing his whittling to pour himself coffee. "But we need to be careful. Your uncle's men could be anywhere." As if summoned by his words, the distant sound of hoofbeats reached them. Lucas was on his feet instantly, his relaxed demeanor vanishing as he doused the fire with dirt. "Pack up," he instructed tersely. Quickly, Rose didn't question him, gathering her few belongings while Lucas saddled the Palomino with impressive speed. Within minutes, they were mounted and moving, leaving minimal trace of their camp behind. They rode hard through the morning, keeping to ravines and wooded areas whenever possible. Lucas remained vigilant, frequently checking their back trail. By midday, the hoofbeats had faded, but the tension in Lucas's shoulders told Rose they weren't safe yet. "There's a trading post about an hour ahead," Lucas finally said as they paused to rest the horse. "Run by a Blackfoot man named Thomas Running Elk. He fought for the Union in the war, came back to establish the post. We can get supplies there, Maybe information. Rose nodded, grateful for the plan. Her city-bred body ached from the unaccustomed riding, though she'd sooner die than complain. Will your friend help us? Thomas isn't exactly a friend, Lucas admitted. But he respects honesty and despises men who prey on the vulnerable. He'll help if I explain the situation. The trading post appeared on the horizon as a collection of log buildings surrounded by a sturdy fence. As they approached, Rose noted the American flag flying alongside another she didn't recognize, presumably Blackfoot. A tall, broad-shouldered man with streaks of gray in his long black hair emerged from the main building as they rode in. His weathered face remained impassive as he observed their approach. Jameson, he acknowledged with a slight nod. Been 3 winters. Thomas, Lucas greeted, dismounting and helping Rose down. This is Miss Rose Vallencourt. We need supplies and information. Thomas's dark eyes assessed Rose with an intensity that made her straighten her spine. Whatever he saw seemed to satisfy him, as he nodded again. Come inside. My wife will make food. The interior of the trading post was neat and well-stocked, with goods ranging from practical necessities to colorful blankets and beadwork. A petite woman with kind eyes introduced herself as Sarah Running Elk, ushering Rose to a chair while Thomas and Lucas spoke in low voices near the counter. You look exhausted, dear, Sarah observed, placing a bowl of stew before Rose. Riding with Lucas Jameson tends to be exciting, from what I hear. Rose managed a small smile. You could say that. You know him well. He saved my son during a blizzard 2 years ago, Sarah replied. Tracked him for 3 days when the boy wandered off hunting. Lucas Jameson doesn't make many friends, but those he makes, he keeps. She glanced toward the men. Though I suspect there's more to his interest in your situation than mere friendship. Before Rose could inquire further, Lucas approached their table. Thomas says 6 riders passed through here yesterday, asking about a man and woman heading north. They claim to be looking for a thief and his accomplice. Rose's hands tightened around her bowl. Uncle Vernon works quickly. Thomas sent them east with a story about seeing us headed that way, Lucas continued. But they'll figure out the deception eventually. We need to move soon. Take a different route to Fort Benton. Thomas joined them, spreading a crude map on the table. The direct trail is watched, he said, tracing a line with his finger. But there is another way, through Crow territory. My wife's cousin is married to a Crow hunter. I can send word ahead that you come in peace. Lucas studied the route, frowning. It's rough country. Add 3 days to our journey, at least. Better slow than dead, Thomas replied bluntly. Rose set down her spoon. I won't be the reason you die, Lucas. If this route is safer, we take it. Something flickered in Lucas's eyes, surprise, perhaps, at her determination. He nodded once, decisively. We'll need more supplies for the longer journey. Thomas stood. I will prepare what you need. You rest tonight. Leave before dawn. That evening, Sarah showed Rose to a small room behind the trading post where she could bathe and change into clean clothes, practical riding clothes that Sarah insisted on giving her, saying they would draw less attention than Rose's town dress. When Rose emerged, her hair braided simply down her back, Lucas did a double take that brought unexpected warmth to her cheeks. He quickly masked his reaction, turning back to his conversation with Thomas, but not before Rose caught Sarah's knowing smile. They departed before the first light of dawn, their saddlebags heavy with provisions. Thomas had provided a second horse, a steady mare that Rose found much easier to manage than riding double with Lucas. Though she immediately missed the security of his presence, she appreciated the independence the arrangement afforded her. The new route took them west of their original path, through increasingly rugged terrain. Lucas remained vigilant, but seemed less concerned about immediate pursuit, allowing them to maintain a steadier pace that spared both horses and riders. Tell me about Boston, Lucas said during a brief rest on their second day along the new trail. I've never been east of the Mississippi. Rose looked up from adjusting her mare's saddle. It's orderly. Civilized in ways the West isn't yet. There are cobblestone streets and gaslights, libraries with more books than you could read in a lifetime. She paused, remembering. But it can be stifling, too. Everyone watching, judging. Women especially have very narrow paths they're permitted to walk. Is that why you came west with your father? Partly, Rose admitted. Mother died when I was 16. Father had already established the mine by then, but returned east frequently. After 3 years of living with my aunt as chaperone, attending endless social functions aimed at securing a suitable marriage, I'd had enough. A wry smile curved her lips. I informed father I was coming west with him whether he approved or not. To my surprise, he agreed immediately. Lucas chuckled. Having met you, I'm not surprised he recognized a losing battle. What about you? Rose asked, curious. Where are you from originally? A shadow crossed Lucas's face. Pennsylvania. Small farming town you've never heard of. Left when I was 17, after the war took my father and brother. He mounted his horse with fluid grace. We should keep moving if we want to reach that creek Thomas mentioned before nightfall. Rose recognized the deflection but didn't press. Everyone had parts of their past they preferred not to revisit. She certainly did. Instead, she mounted her mare and followed Lucas into the increasingly dense forest that marked the edge of Crow territory. They made camp that night beside the promised creek, its clear waters providing welcome refreshment after the dusty trail. As Rose returned from washing her face, she found Lucas had built a small fire and was preparing a rabbit he'd shot earlier. I've been thinking, she said, settling across from him. About the mine. Lucas glanced up from his work. What about it? My father always said the Silver Baron was more valuable than most realized, but I never fully understood what he meant. Rose pulled the deed from her satchel, unfolding the worn document. There's something here, some clue I'm missing. Lucas set aside his work and moved to sit beside her, studying the deed in the firelight. Your father was a careful man. If he suspected your uncle might cause trouble, he may have left something for you. Together, they examined the document line by line. It seemed straightforward enough legal language transferring ownership of the Silver Baron mine and all its assets to Rose Elizabeth Vallencourt upon William Vallencourt's death. Wait, Lucas said suddenly, pointing to a small notation in the margin. What's this? Rose peered at the tiny script. It looks like coordinates and initials. JLS, John Linwood Smith, Lucas said immediately. Your father's lawyer in Helena. Rose looked at him in surprise. How did you? I escorted your father to Helena last year when he updated his will, Lucas explained. Smith was his attorney and friend. These coordinates. He pulled out Thomas's map, studying it in the firelight. They're not far from our route to Fort Benton. Hope flickered in Rose's chest. Do you think my father left something with Smith? Something that would help secure my claim? Only one way to find out, Lucas replied, his eyes meeting hers with newfound determination. We make a detour to these coordinates before Fort Benton. That night, Rose lay awake long after Lucas had taken first watch, her mind racing with possibilities. What had her father hidden? Why had he felt the need for such secrecy? And most puzzling of all, why had he arranged for Lucas Jameson, of all people, to be her protector? As if sensing her thoughts, Lucas spoke softly from his position by the fire. You should sleep. Tomorrow's ride will be challenging. Rose turned toward him. Lucas, why did you really agree to protect me? And don't say it was just because of a promise to my father. In the flickering firelight, she watched him consider his answer carefully. Your father was the first man in years to look at me and see something worth salvaging, he finally said. When most people heard bounty hunter, they assumed I was little better than the men I tracked. William saw differently. That doesn't fully answer my question, Rose pressed gently. Lucas's gaze remained fixed on the dancing flames. No, it doesn't. A long pause followed before he continued. I've spent most of my adult life alone, Rose. Moving from job to job, town to town. Never staying long enough to form attachments. It was safer that way. Safer for whom? For everyone. His voice held a finality that suggested old wounds. Get some sleep. I'll wake you for your watch in a few hours. Rose wanted to push further, but recognized the walls he'd erected. Instead, she closed her eyes, listening to the night sounds of the wilderness and the occasional shift of Lucas's movement as he maintained his vigilant watch. The next 3 days passed in a blur of challenging terrain and increasing camaraderie. Rose discovered Lucas was a patient teacher, showing her how to build a fire that produced minimal smoke, how to read animal tracks, and even basic shooting lessons with his spare revolver. In turn, she shared stories of Boston society that often made him laugh a rich, warm sound she found herself trying to elicit more frequently. On the fourth day, they encountered a small party of crow hunters who had received Thomas's message. The men escorted them through a particularly treacherous mountain pass, sharing their food and fire for one night before pointing them toward the coordinates on the deed. "You've changed," Lucas observed as they rode away from the crow camp. "From the woman I first met in Silver Creek." Rose considered this. "I suppose near-death experiences and sleeping under the stars will do that to a person." "It suits you," he said simply, spurring his horse ahead to scout their path. The coordinates led them to a small cabin nestled in a hidden valley, its weathered exterior suggesting it had stood for many years. A stream burbled nearby, and wildflowers dotted the clearing around the structure. It looked peaceful, almost enchanted, the last place one would expect to hold secrets. "Stay behind me," Lucas instructed as they approached, his hand resting on his revolver. The cabin door opened before they reached it, revealing a white-haired man with spectacles perched on his nose and a shotgun held casually in his hands. "I was wondering when you'd arrive, Miss Vallencourt," the man called out. "William said you'd come eventually." His gaze shifted to Lucas, and his bushy eyebrows rose. "And with Lucas Jameson, no less." William chose well. Rose exchanged a glance with Lucas. "John Smith?" she ventured. The man nodded, lowering his shotgun. "Attorney at law, though these days I prefer the solitude of this valley to Helena's courtrooms." He stepped aside, gesturing them in. "Come inside. What I have to show you shouldn't be seen by passing eyes." The interior of the cabin belied its rustic exterior. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with leather-bound legal texts. A large desk dominated one corner, covered with neat stacks of papers. Smith moved to a painting on the far wall, a landscape of the very valley they were in, and swung it aside to reveal a small safe. "Your father entrusted me with this about 8 months ago," Smith explained as he worked the combination. "Said if anything happened to him, you would eventually find your way here." The safe opened with a click, and he withdrew a leather portfolio. "He was a remarkable man, your father. Saw things others missed." Rose accepted the portfolio with trembling hands. Inside, she found documents that made her breath catch, detailed accounts of her Uncle Vernon's illegal dealings, evidence of claim jumping, tax evasion, even a connection to the robberies Lucas had mentioned. Most damning of all was a letter in her uncle's hand, discussing a plan to eliminate obstacles to gaining control of the Silver Baron. "This is enough to have him arrested," she whispered, looking up at Lucas. "More than enough," Smith confirmed. "There's also this." He handed her a smaller envelope. "A letter from your father. Private. I haven't read it." Rose tucked it away, too overwhelmed to read it in the presence of others. "Thank you for keeping this safe, Mr. Smith." The attorney nodded, his expression solemn. "I've sent copies of the most critical documents to the territorial governor and the federal marshal in Helena. They'll be expecting you." His gaze shifted to Lucas. "William spoke highly of you, Mr. Jameson. Said you were the only man he'd trust with his daughter's life." Lucas's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I am to prove him right." They spent the night at Smith's cabin, the attorney insisting they rest before continuing to Fort Benton. After a simple but hearty dinner, Rose excused herself to the small porch, needing solitude to read her father's letter. With fingers that wouldn't quite steady, she broke the seal and unfolded the pages covered in her father's familiar handwriting. "My dearest Rose, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and you have shown the courage and resourcefulness I always knew you possessed. I am sorry for the danger my death has placed you in, but not sorry for making you my heir. The Silver Baron was always meant to be yours, not just for its silver, but for what lies beneath it. What few know, what Vernon suspects but cannot prove, is that the primary silver vein is merely the surface wealth. Last year, our deepest shaft uncovered a gold deposit that may be the richest in Montana territory. I kept this discovery secret, developing it slowly, waiting until you were ready to take control. The deed you hold contains coordinates to a separate claim I registered in your name alone, the true heart of our fortune. I have arranged protection for you in the form of Lucas Jameson. He is a man with a troubled past, but an honorable heart. Trust him, Rose. In time, perhaps you will come to see in him what I did, a man worthy of not just your trust, but your heart. Know that I love you always, and that your mother would be as proud as I am of the woman you have become. Your loving father, William tears blurred Rose's vision as she folded the letter. Her father had somehow intuited that Lucas would come to mean something to her beyond mere protection. The thought was both comforting and unsettling. "Rose," Lucas's voice came softly from behind her. "Are you all right?" She turned, finding him standing in the doorway, concern etched on his features. The setting sun cast him in golden light, highlighting the strength in his stance and the unexpected gentleness in his eyes. "My father left me a letter," she explained, wiping away tears. "He knew about the gold beneath the silver baron. It's why Uncle Vernon wants the mine so desperately he suspects, but can't prove it exists." Lucas whistled low. "That changes things. Vernon won't just want you gone, he'll want you dead with no questions asked." "He already does," Rose replied, her voice steadying as determination replaced grief. "But now we have the evidence to stop him." She hesitated, debating whether to share the personal portion of her father's letter. "My father also wrote about you." Something flickered in Lucas's expression, wariness, perhaps. "What did he say?" "That you were a man with a troubled past, but an honorable heart." Rose met his gaze steadily. "That I should trust you." Lucas looked away, his profile sharp against the darkening sky. "Your father saw the best in people. Sometimes things that weren't there." "I disagree," Rose said quietly. "I think he saw exactly what was there, beneath the surface." She stepped closer, close enough that she could see the pulse beating in his throat, just like he saw the gold beneath the silver. The analogy hung between them, loaded with meaning neither was quite ready to acknowledge. After a long moment, Lucas cleared his throat. "We should rest. It's still 2 days to Fort Benton, and we'll need to be alert." Rose nodded, recognizing his retreat, but not minding it. Some revelations needed time to settle. "Good night, Lucas." "Good night, Rose." He lingered a moment longer, as if wanting to say more, before turning back into the cabin. They departed at first light, Smith providing them with fresh supplies and a more detailed map of the route ahead. The attorney promised to follow in a few days, bringing additional documentation to support their case against Vernon. The journey to Fort Benton passed without incident, the landscape gradually shifting from mountains to rolling prairie. Rose found herself watching Lucas more often, noting the easy way he sat his horse, the alertness that never quite left his eyes, the rare smiles that transformed his entire countenance. Fort Benton presented a stark contrast to the wilderness they'd traversed, a bustling river port where steamboats from St. Louis unloaded supplies and passengers bound for the Montana goldfields. The fort itself had evolved from a military outpost to a commercial center, with wooden buildings lining muddy streets filled with a diverse array of people. Lucas led them directly to the federal marshal's office, a solid brick building that stood out among its wooden neighbors. Marshal Daniel Cooper was a barrel-chested man with a no-nonsense demeanor that softened slightly when Lucas introduced Rose. "I received word from John Smith," Cooper confirmed, examining the documents Rose presented. "This is serious business, Miss Vallencourt. Your uncle has connections throughout the territory, but not above the law," Rose stated firmly. Cooper's weathered face creased in a slight smile. "No, madam, not above the law. I've already dispatched deputies to Silver Creek with arrest warrants for Vernon Vallencourt and his associates." He glanced at Lucas. "Mr. Jameson's reputation lends considerable weight to your case. Not many men would cross him without good reason." Rose turned to Lucas, surprised. "Your reputation?" A muscle twitched in Lucas's jaw. "Former reputation." Cooper snorted. "The man tracked Butcher Blake Hollister through a blizzard for 12 days. Brought him in half-frozen, but alive when most would have shot him, and claimed self-defense. Jameson's particular about doing things right." The marshal arranged rooms for them at the Grand Union Hotel, separate rooms, with a connecting door that could be locked from either side. As they settled in, Rose felt an odd mixture of relief and disappointment. After weeks of sleeping under the stars with Lucas nearby, the privacy felt strangely isolating. A knock at the connecting door roused her from her thoughts. She opened it to find Lucas standing there, his expression uncharacteristically uncertain. "I thought you might want to get some proper food," he suggested. "The hotel dining room is supposed to be the best in the territory." Rose smiled. "I'd like that very much." The dining room was elegant by frontier standards: white tablecloths, polished silverware, and a piano player providing gentle background music. Rose, wearing a borrowed dress that Sarah Running Elk had packed for her, felt Lucas's appreciative gaze as they were seated. "You clean up well, cowboy," she teased lightly. Lucas tugged at the collar of his one good shirt, looking uncomfortable but handsome in the soft lamplight. "Don't get used to it. I'm more at home on the trail than in places like this." They ordered steaks and potatoes, luxuriating in the first real meal they'd had in weeks. As they ate, Rose found herself studying Lucas openly, noting how other diners gave their table a wide berth recognition and wariness in their glances. "Your reputation really does precede you," she observed. Lucas sighed, setting down his fork. "It's complicated, Rose. The things I did as a bounty hunter. They were legal, but not always pretty. Tell me," she urged gently. "I want to understand." He studied her face, perhaps looking for judgment or fear. Finding neither, he began to speak, his voice low. "After my family died, I drifted west. Was angry at the world, took risks no sensible man would. Ended up saving a federal marshal during a saloon fight purely by accident. He offered me a job hunting fugitives." Lucas rotated his glass slowly, watching the amber liquid catch the light. "I discovered I had a talent for tracking, for understanding how desperate men think. Brought in my first bounty at 19. By 25, I had a reputation that made men surrender rather than face me." "You were good at your job," Rose prompted when he fell silent. "Too good," he admitted. "Started seeing myself becoming something I didn't like: cold, detached. The kind of man who values the letter of the law over its spirit." His eyes met hers across the table. "Then I tracked Blake Hollister into the mountains during that blizzard Cooper mentioned. What happened? Found him half dead in a cave. Could have shot him, claimed he resisted. No one would have questioned it. He'd killed 3 families." Lucas's expression darkened with memory. "But as I stood there, gun drawn, I realized I was at a crossroads. Kill him and lose what remained of my humanity, or bring him in and prove there was still something in me worth saving." "You chose right," Rose said softly. "Your father thought so." A ghost of a smile touched Lucas's lips. "Met him a month later. He offered me a job that didn't involve hunting men. First person in years to look at me and see possibility instead of danger." Understanding bloomed in Rose's heart. Her father's trust had been a lifeline to Lucas, just as Lucas had become hers. Before she could respond, however, a commotion near the hotel entrance caught their attention. Marshal Cooper strode into the dining room, his expression grim as he approached their table. "Miss Vallencourt, Mr. Jameson. I'm afraid I have news." Rose's heart sank. "My uncle." Cooper nodded. "He wasn't in Silver Creek when my deputies arrived. Got word he's headed this way with a dozen men. They'll reach Fort Benton by tomorrow noon." Lucas was immediately alert, all traces of relaxation vanishing. "He knows we're here." "Appears so." Cooper's hand rested meaningfully on his sidearm. "I've telegraphed for reinforcements from Helena, but they won't arrive until the day after tomorrow at earliest." "We should leave," Lucas said, already calculating. "Find somewhere safer to wait." Rose straightened her spine, a decision crystallizing in her mind. "No," she said firmly, surprising both men. "I'm tired of running. This ends here." Lucas leaned forward, his voice urgent. "Rose, your uncle is coming with enough men to overrun the marshal's office. This isn't about bravery, it's about survival. It's about justice," she countered, "and claiming what's rightfully mine." Her gaze held his, unwavering. "I trust you to keep me safe, Lucas, but I won't spend my life looking over my shoulder." A complex series of emotions crossed Lucas's face: frustration, admiration, and something deeper she couldn't quite name. Finally, he turned to Cooper. "How many deputies do you have?" "4, the marshal replied. "Good men, but we're outnumbered." "Not necessarily," Lucas mused, his tactical mind already working. "Vernon and his men will be expecting an ambush on the trail or a defense at the marshal's office. They won't be expecting us to take the fight to them." Cooper raised an eyebrow. "You have a plan?" "The beginnings of one." Lucas glanced at Rose. "But it hinges on whether you're willing to take a significant risk." Rose didn't hesitate. "Whatever it takes to end this." As night fell over Fort Benton, plans were laid in the marshal's office. Lucas's strategy was audacious but sound. Instead of waiting for Vernon's arrival, they would intercept his party at Dawn's Crossing, 5 miles outside town. The narrow bridge there would force Vernon's men into a vulnerable position, unable to use their superior numbers effectively. "I don't like using you as bait," Lucas told Rose as they finalized preparations. "But Vernon needs to believe you're alone and vulnerable." "I understand," Rose assured him, checking the small Derringer Cooper had provided her. "I can handle myself." Lucas's expression softened for a moment. "I know you can." He hesitated, then added, "Rose, if something goes wrong tomorrow, it won't." She interrupted, not wanting to hear whatever goodbye he might be preparing. "We've come too far to fail now." Dawn broke clear and cold over the Montana plains. Rose stood alone on the bridge at Dawn's crossing, a solitary figure in a blue riding dress, her auburn hair catching the early morning light. Below the bridge, hidden among the rocks and vegetation along the creek banks, Lucas, Cooper, and the deputies waited in position. The thunder of approaching hoofbeats announced Vernon's arrival. Rose steeled herself, rehearsing the script she and Lucas had prepared. Show fear, but not panic. Appear resigned, but not defeated. Everything depended on her performance. Vernon Vallencourt led his men onto the bridge, reining in his horse 20 paces from where Rose stood. Time had not been kind to her father's younger brother. His once handsome face had grown jowled and flushed, his eyes bloodshot from drink or lack of sleep. Behind him rode 11 hard-faced men, guns visible at their sides. "Niece," Vernon called out, his voice carrying the false warmth she remembered from childhood visits. "This is a pleasant surprise. I've been worried sick about you." "I'm sure you have, Uncle," Rose replied, infusing her voice with just the right note of bitterness. "Worried I might survive to claim what's mine." Vernon's smile didn't reach his eyes. "You misunderstand, my dear. I've only ever had your best interests at heart. A young woman alone can't possibly manage a mining operation." "I'm not alone," Rose stated. "I have evidence of your crimes, Uncle. Tax evasion, claim jumping, conspiracy to commit murder." She pulled her father's letter from her pocket. "And I know about the gold beneath the silver baron." Vernon's facade cracked, naked greed flashing across his features. "William told you?" When Rose nodded, he signaled his men to spread out. "Then you understand why this is bigger than both of us. That gold could make the Vallencourt name legendary." "It already is legendary," Rose countered. "For honesty and fair dealing, everything you lack." Vernon's expression hardened. "Enough games, Rose. Where is your protector?" "The infamous Lucas Jameson." Rose allowed her gaze to flicker briefly to the creek bank, a deliberate tell. "Gone. I sent him away." "Liar." Vernon spat, drawing his revolver. "Men, search thee." His words cut off as the first shot rang out from the creek bed, striking the revolver from his hand with pinpoint accuracy. Before Vernon's men could react, more shots erupted from multiple positions along the banks, creating chaos as horses reared and men dove for cover. "Drop your weapons." Cooper's voice boomed from his position. "Federal Marshal, you're surrounded." Several of Vernon's men immediately threw down their guns, having no stomach for a fight against unseen opponents. Others returned fire wildly, bullets splintering the bridge railings around Rose. She ducked down as planned, drawing her Derringer but keeping it hidden in the folds of her dress. Through the confusion, Rose saw Vernon abandon his panicking men, spurring his horse directly toward her with murderous intent. Before she could raise her weapon, Lucas appeared from nowhere, launching himself from the creek bank onto the bridge in a move of breathtaking athleticism. He tackled Vernon from his horse, both men crashing to the wooden planks mere feet from where Rose crouched. Vernon recovered quickly, drawing a hidden knife and slashing at Lucas, who barely evaded the blade. They grappled fiercely, Vernon fighting with the desperation of a man with nothing to lose. When Vernon momentarily gained the upper hand, pinning Lucas against the bridge railing, Rose acted without hesitation. "Uncle Vernon," she called sharply. As he turned toward her voice, she fired the Derringer. The bullet grazed his shoulder, causing him to recoil in pain and surprise. It was all the opening Lucas needed. With a swift, powerful movement, he disarmed Vernon and subdued him, forcing him face down on the bridge. "It's over, Vernon," Lucas said, his breathing heavy as he secured the older man's hands. "You've lost." The skirmish ended as quickly as it had begun. Cooper and his deputies rounded up Vernon's men, most of whom surrendered without further resistance when they saw their leader captured. Only 2 of Vernon's party had been injured, neither seriously. Rose approached her uncle as Lucas pulled him to his feet. Vernon's face was a mask of hatred and disbelief. "You'll never make that mine successful," he spat. "You're just a woman playing at business. The men won't respect you." Rose regarded him calmly. "The men respected Father because he was fair and honest. I'll earn their respect the same way." She leaned closer, her voice dropping. "And I'll have help from someone Father trusted implicitly." Vernon's gaze darted to Lucas, understanding dawning. "So that's how it is," he sneered. "William's precious daughter and his pet reformed outlaw. How touching." Lucas's expression remained impassive, but Rose noticed his hands tighten slightly on Vernon's restraints. "Marshal," he called, "I believe Mr. Vallencourt is ready for his accommodations in your jail." As Cooper led Vernon away, Rose turned to Lucas. In the aftermath of violence, he stood vigilant, scanning the area for any remaining threats. Only when he was satisfied did he approach her, concern evident in every line of his body. "Are you hurt?" he asked, eyes searching her for injuries. "No," she assured him, suddenly aware of how close they stood. "Thanks to you." Relief washed over his features, followed immediately by something deeper, more vulnerable. Without warning, he pulled her into his arms, holding her with a fierceness that spoke volumes about the fear he'd suppressed throughout the confrontation. "I thought I'd lost you when Vernon charged," he confessed, his voice rough against her hair. "If anything had happened to you." Rose drew back slightly, just enough to meet his gaze. "But it didn't. We won, Lucas." His eyes searched hers, the carefully maintained walls finally crumbling. "Rose." Whatever he intended to say was interrupted by Cooper's return. "Prisoners are secured," the marshal announced, either oblivious to or tactfully ignoring the moment he disrupted. "Reinforcements should arrive by sundown to help transport them to Helena for trial." Lucas reluctantly released Rose, though he remained close as they discussed next steps. The evidence against Vernon was overwhelming between Rose's documents, the testimony of Cooper and his deputies, and several of Vernon's own men turning state's evidence in exchange for leniency. Conviction was all but certain. "What happens now?" Cooper asked as they prepared to return to Fort Benton. Rose straightened her shoulders. "Decision made. We return to Silver Creek. I have a mind to run." Lucas's expression revealed nothing, but Rose felt a subtle tension in his stance. The question of his place in her future hung unspoken between them. The return to Silver Creek 3 weeks later was triumphant, yet subdued. News of Vernon's arrest and the circumstances surrounding it had preceded them, and the townspeople lined the main street to welcome Rose home. Many miners from the Silver Baron were among them, their honest faces showing relief that ownership had been resolved. Lucas rode beside Rose, vigilant as ever despite Vernon's imprisonment. He had been quieter since the confrontation at Dawn's Crossing, as if wrestling with decisions of his own. Rose had given him space, understanding that a man accustomed to solitude might need time to adjust to new possibilities. The mine foreman, Hank Weber, greeted them at the entrance to the Silver Baron's main office, a simple wooden structure overlooking the mine entrance. Gray-haired and weathered, Weber had been with the operation since its beginning. "Miss Vallencourt," he said, removing his hat respectfully. "Welcome home. The men are eager to show you the progress we've made in your absence." Rose dismounted, grateful for the normalcy of Weber's greeting. "Thank you, Hank. I'm eager to see it." She glanced at Lucas, who remained on his horse, his expression unreadable. "Mr. Jameson will be joining us. My father held him in the highest regard." Weber nodded to Lucas. "Mr. Jameson, your reputation precedes you. Seems to be a recurring theme," Lucas replied dryly, finally dismounting. The tour of the mine revealed that operations had continued smoothly despite the ownership dispute. Weber had kept the men focused on their work, maintaining production levels while awaiting resolution. Rose listened carefully, asked intelligent questions, and demonstrated the knowledge she'd gained from years of discussions with her father. "Your father mentioned a new vein we were exploring," she said casually as they examined the latest or samples in the assay office. "In the deepest shaft." Weber's eyes widened slightly before he controlled his expression. "Yes, madam. Found it about 8 months back. Your father asked us to keep it quiet, develop it slowly." "I'd like to see it," Rose said. The foreman hesitated, glancing at Lucas. It's a difficult descent, Miss Vallencourt. Perhaps Mr. Jameson could inspect it on your behalf. I'll manage, Rose insisted, already removing her riding jacket and reaching for one of the canvas work coats hanging by the door. Father made sure I understood every aspect of mining, Hank. I can't run this operation from behind a desk. Lucas's mouth twitched in what might have been admiration. I'll accompany you, he said, his tone making it clear this wasn't negotiable. The descent into the mine was indeed challenging, a series of wooden ladders and narrow passages leading hundreds of feet below the surface. Rose navigated them competently, though she was grateful for Lucas's steady presence behind her. The air grew warmer and more stale as they descended, the light from their lanterns casting eerie shadows on the timbered walls. When they finally reached the bottom shaft, Weber directed them to a recently excavated tunnel that branched from the main silver vein. As they approached, Lucas's lantern caught a gleam in the rock face that made Rose's breath catch. Gold. Not just traces, but a rich vein of it, glittering in the lantern light like captured sunshine. Her father had been right, the deposit was potentially worth millions, far exceeding the value of the silver that had made the mine famous. Your father said to tell you, when the time came, that this was your mother's legacy, Weber said quietly. Said she always believed there was gold here, even when others laughed at the notion. Rose blinked back unexpected tears. Her mother, practical, determined Elizabeth Vallencourt, had been right all along. Thank you for keeping this safe, Hank. Your father trusted me, the foreman replied simply. As I'll trust you, Miss Vallencourt. When they emerged from the mine hours later, dusty and tired but exhilarated by what they'd seen, Rose found herself looking at Silver Creek with new eyes. This town, this mine, they were her responsibility now, a legacy to protect and nurture. Lucas helped her dismount at her father's house, her house, now a handsome two-story structure at the edge of town. The housekeeper, Mrs. Holloway, had kept it immaculate in her absence, and the familiar surroundings brought both comfort and a renewed sense of loss for her father. You should rest, Lucas suggested as Mrs. Holloway fussed over Rose's dusty appearance. It's been a long day. There was something in his tone that made Rose study him more carefully. Will you join me for dinner later? There's much to discuss. A shadow crossed his features. I should check the perimeter, make sure everything's secure. He was withdrawing, she realized with a pang. Now that she was safely home, surrounded by loyal employees and the familiar structures of her life, Lucas was already planning his exit. The thought left her cold despite the warm spring day. Lucas, she began, but he was already heading for the door. I'll be back before dark, he promised, not quite meeting her eyes. Left alone in her father's study, Rose sank into the familiar leather chair behind the desk, overwhelmed by the events of the past weeks. Her gaze fell on a framed photograph, her parents on their wedding day, young and hopeful, her mother's hand resting protectively over the small swell of her pregnancy with Rose. Her father's letter lay beside it, the paper worn from multiple readings. Trust him, Rose. In time, perhaps you will come to see in him what I did, a man worthy of not just your trust, but your heart. Her father had seen what Rose was only now fully acknowledging to herself, that Lucas Jameson had become essential to her in ways that transcended protection or gratitude. But Lucas himself seemed determined to maintain the distance his profession had ingrained in him. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Mrs. Holloway entered, carrying a silver tray with tea and fresh biscuits. You have a visitor, Miss Rose. Mr. Weber's wife brought over some of her preserves as a welcome home gift. Rose set aside her father's letter. Please show her in, Mrs. Holloway. Instead of Mrs. Weber, however, it was Lucas who entered the study, his expression determined. He'd clearly washed and changed clothes, and something about his demeanor made Rose's heart quicken. I thought you were checking the perimeter, she said, rising from her chair. I did. He closed the door behind him, stepping into the room with the careful movements of a man who had made a difficult decision. Rose, I need to say something, and I need you to listen without interrupting. She nodded, sensing the importance of the moment. Lucas took a deep breath. When your father asked me to look after you if anything happened to him, I agreed out of respect and obligation. I didn't expect. He paused, searching for words. I didn't expect you. Your courage, your determination. The way you faced danger head-on instead of running from it. He moved closer, his eyes never leaving hers. These past weeks, I've been happier than I can remember being since before the war. Even with people trying to kill us. A wry smile touched his lips. Maybe because of it. Danger has a way of stripping away pretenses. Lucas, Rose began, but he held up a hand. Please, let me finish. He swallowed hard. I've been alone most of my adult life. Told myself it was better that way, safer for everyone. But being with you has shown me how empty that existence was. His voice dropped, vulnerable in a way she'd never heard before. I love you, Rose. I think I started falling for you the moment you stood your ground in Silver Creek, refusing to abandon your father's legacy. Rose's heart soared, but Lucas wasn't finished. I know I'm not what most would consider a suitable match for someone like you. I have a past that follows me everywhere. No fortune to speak of, but I promise you this: if you'll have me, I'll spend every day of my life making sure you never regret it. When he finally fell silent, Rose closed the distance between them, placing her hand gently against his cheek. Are you finished? She asked softly. He nodded, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. Good, she said, because I have something to say as well. Her fingers traced the line of his jaw, feeling the slight tremor there. Lucas Jameson, my father was the wisest man I've ever known, and he saw something in you worth trusting with his most precious possession, not the mine, but me. She smiled up at him, no longer hiding the depth of her feelings. I love you too, Lucas. Not despite your past, but because of how it shaped you into the man standing before me, honorable, courageous, and far more gentle than you give yourself credit for. Hope bloomed in his expression. You're sure? Your life would be simpler with a proper Boston gentleman. Rose laughed. I left Boston because I wanted more than a simple, predetermined life. She moved closer, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from him. I want a partner, Lucas. Someone who sees me as an equal, who challenges me and supports me in equal measure. I can do that, he promised, his hands coming to rest lightly on her waist. I know you can. Rose's gaze dropped briefly to his lips before meeting his eyes again. Now, are you going to kiss me, or do I need to take charge of that as well? Lucas laughed, a free, unguarded sound that transformed his entire countenance. I wouldn't dare disappoint you, Miss Vallencourt. His lips met hers with a gentleness that belied his strength, a kiss that began tentatively but quickly deepened as years of solitude and weeks of unacknowledged longing melted away between them. Rose wound her arms around his neck, surrendering to the overwhelming rightness of being in his embrace. When they finally parted, both breathless, Lucas rested his forehead against hers. They wanted you gone, he whispered, echoing the words that had haunted their journey. Vernon, his men, they all wanted you eliminated. And now? Rose asked, her fingers threading through his hair. Lucas smiled, the last of his reserve falling away. Now, I plan to stay beside you forever, if you'll have me. I can think of nothing I want more, she replied, sealing the promise with another kiss. Epilogue: 3 years later, the Silver Baron Mine Company's annual Founders' Day celebration filled the streets of Silver Creek with music, laughter, and the delicious aromas of barbecue and fresh-baked pies. What had begun as a small gathering of miners and their families had grown into a territorial event, drawing visitors from as far as Helena and Bozeman. From her vantage point on the hotel balcony, Rose Jameson surveyed the festivities with satisfaction. Silver Creek had flourished in the 3 years since she'd taken control of the mine, growing from a rough mining camp into a proper town with a school, church, and even a small hospital funded by the mine's increasing profits. Admiring your handiwork? Lucas asked, joining her at the railing. Their 2-year-old daughter, Elizabeth, dozed against his shoulder, her dark curls so like her father's spilling over his capable hand. Rose leaned into his side, cherishing the solid warmth of him. Our handiwork, she corrected. I couldn't have done any of this without you. It was true. Lucas had proven himself not just a devoted husband, but an invaluable partner in business. His strategic mind and uncompromising integrity had helped transform the Silver Baron into a model operation, with safety standards and working conditions that attracted the best miners in the territory. The gold vein, developed carefully and without fanfare, had made them wealthy beyond Rose's expectations. though they lived modestly compared to what their fortune might have afforded. "Have you seen the newest arrival?" Lucas asked, nodding toward the street below, where John Smith, no longer in seclusion, was helping an elegantly dressed older woman from a carriage. Rose smiled. "Aunt Margaret finally accepted my invitation. I was beginning to think Boston had claimed her permanently. Think she'll approve of your Wild West husband?" Lucas teased, the confidence of 3 years of marriage evident in his tone. "She already does," Rose replied. Her last letter said any man who could convince her stubborn niece to settle down must be quite extraordinary. Lucas chuckled, the sound rumbling pleasantly against Rose's side. "Your aunt is a wise woman." They watched as Marshal Cooper, now Territorial Governor Cooper, made his way through the crowd, stopping to shake hands and chat with townspeople. Vernon Vallencourt's trial had made Cooper something of a celebrity, launching his political career. He caught sight of them on the balcony and offered a respectful tip of his hat. "Any word from Thomas and Sarah?" Lucas asked, shifting Elizabeth to his other shoulder when she stirred. "Their trading post is thriving," Rose confirmed. "Sarah mentioned they might visit this winter once the snow makes travel easier for their sleigh." The conversation paused as Elizabeth woke, her blue eyes so like her mother's blinking drowsily before lighting up at the sight of Rose. "Mama!" she exclaimed, reaching pudgy arms toward her. Rose gathered her daughter close, breathing in the sweet scent of her hair. "Hello, my love. Did you have a nice nap?" Elizabeth nodded solemnly before her attention was captured by the colorful bunting decorating the balcony. As she reached for it, Lucas caught her small hand gently. "Careful, little one," he murmured. "Those aren't for touching." Rose watched them together, her heart full to bursting. Lucas had taken to fatherhood with the same quiet determination. He approached everything thoughtfully, completely, with unwavering commitment. The feared bounty hunter had become a tender father who read bedtime stories with different voices for each character and patiently answered endless questions from their curious daughter. "What are you thinking?" Lucas asked, catching her contemplative expression. Rose smiled, shifting Elizabeth to her hip. "I was thinking about what my father wrote in his letter, that you were a man worthy of not just my trust, but my heart." William was biased. Lucas demurred, though pleasure warmed his eyes. "William was right," Rose countered, leaning up to place a soft kiss on his lips, much to Elizabeth's giggling delight. As usual, below them, the celebration continued as the sun began its descent toward the western mountains. Soon they would join the festivities, mingling with friends and employees, sharing in the community they had helped build. But for now, this moment belonged to just the three of them, a family forged through danger and determination, bound by a love neither had expected but both had embraced completely. Lucas wrapped his arm around Rose's waist, drawing her and Elizabeth into a gentle embrace as they gazed out over the town that had become their home. "They wanted you gone," he whispered against her hair, echoing the words that had marked the beginning of their journey together. Rose turned in his arms, her face lifted to his, eyes shining with contentment and love. "And you stayed beside me forever." "Always will," Lucas promised, sealing his vow with a kiss as their daughter clapped her small hands in delight, and the celebration continued around them, a fitting backdrop to the life they had built together one day, one challenge, one triumph at a time.